Hello and welcome to yet another episode of Storytime with the Villagers. And today I am going to talk about one of the greatest football teams ever to exist in African history. But unfortunately, almost all the players of that team perished in a plane crash. And this marked a sad and dark day in the whole of African continent and the world. And it was a big tragedy for Zambian football. This team was none other than the Zambia national football team, the mighty KK11. It was named after Kenneth Kaunda, though later on it came to be known as Chipolopolo. I will talk about that in the later stages of the story. Now, this Zambia national team set off to play Senegal in a World Cup qualifier. That team, the best Zambia has ever had and potentially one of the greatest in African history, never arrived in Senegal. Now, it is on 27th April 1993, Zambia national football team, the KK11, is leaving to a 1994 FIFA World Cup qualifier match against Senegal in Dakar. Before boarding the plane, we have 18 national team players, the coaching staff, supporting staff, and the crew members who are supposed to board that plane. The players in that plane were none other than the two goalkeepers, David Chabala, who was playing for Mufulira Wanderers. There was also Richard Mwanza, who was playing for Kabwe Warriors. Yeah, I think so. The defenders in that plane were Wilson Change from Kabwe Warriors, John Soko from Nkana, Samuel Chomba from Dynamos. There was also this guy Robert Watiakeni from Dynamos, Winter Mumba from Power Dynamos, and also there was this guy Kenan Simambe from Power Dynamos. Remember, Power Dynamos and Dynamos were two different teams where these players were playing from. Now, the midfielders in that plane were Dabi Makinka from Al Ittifaq. There was also this guy Wisdom Mumba Chansa from Dynamos. There was also Eston Mulenga from Nkana. There was also this guy called Moses Chikwalakwala, the youngest 19-year-old from Nkana. There was also Mumba Mwila from Nkana and Godfrey Kangwa. He was playing for Olympic Casablanca in Morocco. Now, the forwards in that plane was Numba Mwitwa from Nkana. There was also this guy who was 23-year-old by then. He was a very good striker. He was called Kelvin Mutale. He was playing for Al Ittifaq. There was also Patrick Banda from Profound Warriors and Moses Masua. He was playing for Kabwe Warriors. Yeah! Now, the coach was Godfrey aka Usa Chitalu, and the assistant coach was Alex Chola. They were all in that plane. The crew members in that plane were Colonel Feston Muhone, who was the first pilot. There was also Colonel Victor Mubanga, he was the second pilot. And also Colonel James Sachika was the third pilot. And also there was another guy called Major Edward Nyambote. He was a flight engineer. And also there was another guy called Corporal Thomas Sakala. I cannot recall his major role in that plane at that time. Now, the plane to be used is a DHC-5 Buffalo. It was a transport aircraft for Zambian Air Force. And they decided to use this Air Force plane because of different reasons. One, the economic situation in Zambia in the 1980s was not so good, which led Kaunda to be voted out of office in 1991. And the copper mines eventually was passed to private hands. So, because of this, funding for football began to dry up, and therefore, travel to away games became increasingly difficult. So since the Zambia's National Federation Football Association for Zambia lacked funds to charter planes and even to pay for seats for passenger aircraft for those players who were going for away games, the federation frequently turned to Zambia Air Force, and alternatively they had to borrow a jet from the Air Force. So this flight had been specially arranged by the Zambian Air Force for the football team. So this journey was scheduled to make 3 refueling stops. The first one was to be at Congo Brazzaville. the second one in Libreville, Gabon, and the third one in Abidjan, Ivory Coast, before finally heading to Senegal. Now, let me take you slightly back. Just 2 days before this plane crash came to happen, the team had traveled to Mauritius for the AFCON qualifier, whereby they beat Mauritius 3-0. That is a place where Kelvin Mutale, he was a young talented striker by then, he scored a hat-trick. Now, I am still telling you the happening and events which happened just few days before a plane crash. This is when the Zambia won their first 2 games in their first qualifying phase, but thereafter they faced another trip again to Madagascar, and as usual they ended up again borrowing the Buffalo from the Zambian Air Force. So the players used that very Buffalo again to fly to Madagascar through Malawi, but when they stopped in Malawi for refueling, there was a dispute over payment, and after hours trapped in the runway, they were eventually allowed to take off again for a 5-hour trip over the Indian Ocean. So when they were above the Indian Ocean, at one moment, the pilot started communicating to the players that, hey guys, it is high time that you wear your life jackets because the way this plane is behaving is unpredictable. Yes! So the players joked about it. They took it lightly, like Johnson Bwalia again, who was one of the survivors, took some light moments to take photographs. But again, such kind of awareness in such kind of a place is not something really to joke about. And never underestimate your instincts at any given time. But again, remember, these very players, at some times they could be heard saying that this plane one day, it will kill us. They never knew that they were responding to their instincts.
Oh my God!
Now, Zambia lost that game against Madagascar, which led to Samuel Ndlovu being sacked as coach, and his replacement was Godfrey Chitalu, though by the time that he was supposed to take over the team, he was sick, but he later recovered and took charge of the team. We are still talking about events which were days before that plane crash. So since the Zambia's Football Association FAZ was financially unstable, they had to use this DHC-5 Buffalo plane to fly. Now let me take you to another flashback. Days before this fateful day, back from the AFCON qualifiers in Mauritius, that is another day, one of the players by then who even scored a hat-trick against Mauritius said that when they were in the plane, he saw and he actually felt that the plane at that time was even struggling to gain altitude while from Mauritius. And he said that even if at any moment that plane crashed that day, they would still be safe because it would anyway float on water since they were above the ocean. And remember, this player was saying this thing exactly 1 week before that fateful day that the plane crashed. Now, focusing on the condition of the plane, the aircraft entered service in 1975, and the plane had been out of service for 5 months from 1992 to early 1993. So eventually test flights were carried out, and the last test flight was on 26th April 1993, exactly 1 day before that flight to Senegal. But after the checks, it was revealed that there were a number of defects in the engine. That was the carbon particles in oil filters, disconnected cables, trace of overheating, and so on. However, the flight went ahead as scheduled regardless. Remember, this team that is boarding this plane at this time is the mighty KK11, a very promising Zambia national team, one of the feared, vibrant teams in the whole of Africa. At the 1988 Olympic Games in Seoul, South Korea, this team beat Italy 4-0, a victory which included a hat-trick from a player called Kalusha Bwalia. I'll tell you something short about Kalusha Bwalia in the later stages of the story. Kalusha Bwalia went ahead and won the Africa Footballer of the Year later that year. Thereafter, KK11 had their eyes in the 1994 Africa Cup of Nations trophy, having finished third in the 1990 edition and a place in their first World Cup edition. Now, as the plane carrying Zambian footballers is about to leave en route to Dakar, Senegal, we have three special cases. 3 KK players are not present in that fateful plane. This is because they were playing for UEFA clubs in Europe, and each of them made separate travel plans from their clubs in Europe to Senegal. Now, one of them was none other than Captain Kalusha Bwalia, who later became the national team coach and president of Football Association of Zambia. He was playing for PSV Eindhoven in the Netherlands. Now, the second one was Charles Musonda, a player for Anderlecht in Belgium. And since he was previously injured, he remained in Belgium for rehabilitation at that time. And the third one was Johnson Bwalia, who was playing for FC Bule in Switzerland. And he would have traveled from Switzerland to Senegal. Now, apart from that, we have separate miraculous cases here. A player called Bennett Mulwanda Simfukwe had been seconded by Football Association of Zambia by his employers ZCCM for 5 years, and he was supposed to travel on this flight. But on the last minute, his employers demanded that he should immediately be removed from the list of those who were officially scheduled to go and play in Senegal. Reasons best known to themselves. Other miraculous cases were from players called Andrew Tembo. He was a 21-year-old midfielder, and Martin Mumba, a third-choice goalkeeper. They almost boarded that flight. They were even at the airport. However, they were asked not to board at the last minute. The one who ordered them not to board was a member of National Team Selections Committee. His name was Patrick Kangwa. Reasons best known to himself. So they were dropped from the squad, and since the players felt so hurt, as a result, they started exchanging bitter words with Kangwa. Hey, you are not fair. Hey, you are not feel good about us. Hey, you have wasted our time, blah, 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 blah. Yes, one would argue that this was a standard selection decision, but on this day, this was the day which decided who would live and who would die. Jesus! Now, in Lusaka, because of the unsustainable and unpredictable condition of the Buffalo plane, Colonel Feston Muhone, who was a pilot, observed that it was a must for this plane to have refueling stops, and therefore he suggested that the plane should fly from Lusaka to Congo-Brazzaville, then from Congo-Brazzaville to Libreville, Gabon, then from Libreville, Gabon on to Abidjan, Ivory Coast for the last refueling before finally arriving in Dakar, Senegal. So the reason for the plane's refueling stopovers was because this plane was built not for long trips. So it was a must for it to make those refueling stops. And remember, this plane being a military aircraft from Zambia Air Force, it was vulnerable to either delays from being denied permission to cross above the foreign country's airspace. And the plane could even be shot down since it was a military aircraft crossing over the foreign airspace. So as the journey was beginning, the Buffalo aircraft, which was having 30 persons, which included 18 members of the Zambia national team, were denied permission to cross above the Congolese airspace, being a military aircraft. So this made the pilot to quickly decide to look for a route which can go direct to Libreville, Gabon and bypass Congo, though the Congolese authorities later allowed them to fly through their airspace. And that was after a long scrutiny and negotiation where the Buffalo landed and refueled. So in Congo-Brazzaville, where this Buffalo landed and refueled, slight engine problems were noted. Despite this, the flight continued because they did not take it as something worrying or serious. So the Buffalo again had to take off, and they flew another 1 hour and 34 minutes from Maya Maya International Airport in Brazzaville to Leon Mba Libreville International Airport in Gabon, where again they landed and refueled. So routine checks were also carried across the aircraft before again it was allowed to fly. Now, it was exactly 2 minutes after takeoff from Libreville, Gabon, the evening of 27th April 1993, the DHC-5 Buffalo transport aircraft from the Zambia Air Force crashed into the Atlantic Ocean. Eyewitnesses say that the plane first exploded before the crash, killing all the 5 crew members and 25 passengers. Jesus! And from that very point, nothing again became relevant, but it was just a huge loss. Young promising players like Kelvin Mutale, who was good at scoring hat tricks, perished. 6 members of the KK 1988 Olympic squad, which beat Italy 4-0, including the goalkeeper Efford Chabala, died. The 1992 Zambia Young Player of the Year, the 19-year-old Moses Chikwalakwala, perished. It was a total of 18 Zambian national team footballers, a coach, assistant coach, 5 crew members, and 5 supporting staff, totaling to 30 persons in the Buffalo plane, all perished. So on that very day when all that was happening, let me take you very far away from Africa, and that is in Amsterdam, Netherlands. In Netherlands, there is this guy, a Zambian football player called Kalusha Bwalia. He was playing for PSV Eindhoven in Amsterdam, Netherlands. And on that day, he is there stretching, clearing his mind, ready to go out and get a flight to Dakar, Senegal, and join his colleague for the upcoming football match, of course. But before he could move out, his landline rings. And you know, in the 1990s, mobile phones were a rare luxury, and you could not just ignore a call when it comes, especially when it is for you. So Bwalia goes and picks up the receiver, and it was a treasurer of the Football Association of Zambia on the other side of the call. And he was saying that, Bwalia, you have to delay the flight. There has been an accident. This was a great shock because for Zambia population, this football team had become a beacon of hope. The team was a source of pride. A great team had perished. A team that had just returned from a 3-0 win against Mauritius in the Africa Cup of Nations qualifier. A team that had 8-year unbeaten home record, and they had become a band of brothers and at the peak of their game. Yes! The team which the USA 1994 World Cup was beckoning. That team had perished just like that. The plane never made it beyond Gabon. So still in the Netherlands, Bwalia, one of the surviving 1993 national team members, breaks down. The news which he already knew is now breaking news all over the televisions across the world. And as a surviving team member, he felt that he has lost brothers, teammates, and the spirit of the group was just lost in one day. So back in Zambia, we have Patrick Kangwa. He was a member of the National Select Committee. He was the same official who denied the 2 players, Andrew Tembo and Martin Mumba, from flying with the rest of the squad in the last minutes, which ended up in the heated exchange, as I explained to you earlier. He immediately flew to Gabon, and by this time, his role had changed from picking players to identifying remains. In Libreville, Gabon, a place where the plane crash had occurred, the bodies had been in water for some time and they had started changing in state, and it was a struggle to search and identify the bodies. So fishermen searched everywhere in and out of the creeks, and the divers went out of the boats, and helicopters were hovering everywhere overhead. That's when they started now finding black kit bags, wreckages, and at the end of it all, 24 out of 30 people aboard the plane had been reclaimed from the Atlantic Ocean and brought ashore in Gabon. No more bodies were found beyond that. So 4,000 miles away, we have a survivor, one of Africa's best footballers, who was preparing to go for this very game, and that was Kalusha Bwalia. He was Africa's Player of the Year in 1988. Earlier that year, he had scored a hat-trick as Zambia thrashed Italy 4-0. That was on the way to the quarter-final in Seoul. Meanwhile, Bwalia arrives in Lusaka in Zambia from the Netherlands. And that is where reality sinks in. Now, they go to the airport, receive the bodies, and one by one, they took the coffins off the plane and transported the bodies to the Independence Stadium in Zambia. And that's when Bwalia realizes that he will never ever see his teammates again. Now, on 2nd May 1993, more than 100,000 Zambians came to the Independence Stadium where Zambia played their home matches for a funeral. Most of those who attended again ended up staying on the streets because the stadium was full to capacity. The stadium could accommodate only 35,000 people. Now, following the all-night vigil and the service of remembrance, the players were finally laid to rest in semicircle graves. Each grave, a tree was planted in front of it in a memorial garden called the Heroes Acres, which is 100 meters north of the stadium. And each grave was having a special dedication to each fallen player. Now, soon after the burying of the fallen heroes, Kalusha Bwalia becomes the centerpiece of the new team, which came now to be known as Chipolopolo, the Copper Bullets. So this new team was quickly assembled to face up the difficult task of having to complete Zambia's World Cup qualifiers and then prepare for the upcoming Africa Cup of Nations, which was only months away, to be hosted in Tunisia. Now, apart from Kalusha's help as a player and captain into assembling a new team, Chipolopolo was also under two Danish coaches, which included former Sunderland player Ian Porterfield. So Kalusha scored an equalizer against Zimbabwe that took Zambia to Nations Cup. They also fought in the World Cup qualifying game against Morocco, in which they were denied an emotional qualification and they lost to Morocco in the final game. Though the new Zambia national team, what you should know is that it was a threat, just like the other team that perished. Because in that game against Morocco, Morocco just survived. Because twice Zambia hit the post, and they also protested that the refereeing of Jean Fidel Diramba from Gabon was poor. Now, before I tell you what happened with the aircraft crash investigation, this is to let you know that by 1994, the new Zambia national team went ahead to display impressive performance in the 1994 Africa Cup of Nations, where they reached the finals. But in the semi-final, they beat Mali 4-0 and they went ahead to the finals, whereby Chipolopolo lost 2-1 to Nigeria, since Sunday Olise, Rashidi Yekini, JJ Okocha were too strong for the new team. So Kalusha Bwalia played until his mid-30s, and at that time, he became the national team coach and later the president of Football Association of Zambia. Now back to Zambia and Gabon. The relationship becomes shaky, and there is claims that the plane had been shot down by the Gabonese military, mistaking it to an invasion force. So this made the diplomatic relations between Gabon and Zambia to be shattered. Neither country wanted to pay for investigation and each trying to put blame on the other. So being a military plane, there was no black box flight recorder. So eventually in 2003, the official report was released, and it was inconclusive though. But now in this report, the blame was put on the defect on the left engine. And further investigation claimed that the left engine of the plane caught fire soon after takeoff from Gabon and it failed. And also another thing which they said is that the pilot who had flown the team from a match in Mauritius in the previous day mistakenly shut down the right engine instead of the left engine, which was burning. Jesus! So this caused the plane to lose power during the climb out of Libreville Airport and fall into the water 500 meters, which was 1,600 feet inside the water. So a Gabonese report released in 2003 also claimed that this was caused by the pilot's action in a faulty warning flight and fatigue. Now back with the Zambia national team Chipolopolo, the resurrected team defied all odds all the years through, displaying an attacking playing style, and therefore they qualify for the 2012 Africa Cup of Nations, which was to be co-hosted by Gabon and Equatorial Guinea. Now Zambia happened to sail through by defeating all the teams in all stages, beating all the teams, and eventually they reached the final, which was to be played against Ivory Coast in Gabon. Yeah! Now, that place where Zambia was supposed to play that final from in Gabon was just a few hundred meters away inland, away from the 1993 plane crash site. Now, so 3 days before the final, the Football Association of Zambia President Kalusha Bwalia, the team captain Katongo, the then Zambian coach Reynard, and the rest of the team, they went to cast flowers into the place where 2 decades earlier, bodies, boots, bags, and so on were washed away in the 1993 crash, in which all the Zambian players on board perished. Now, from that moment, everybody in the team said that this is it, guys. We just need to work as a team to achieve what these people wanted to achieve who perished here in Gabon. So the boys at that time believed that they are not only playing for themselves, they are also playing for the fallen heroes. And that meant a lot more than just playing in the final.
Chai!
Eventually, Zambia beat Ivory Coast 8-7 in penalty shootout after the game ended 0-0 after normal and added time. Yes! And the victory was dedicated to the ones who lost their lives in the 1993 tragedy. And that was a sad story of Zambian football with a good and happy ending. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel and you will always find exclusive information like this. You will never find it anywhere else. Thank you for subscribing. Until next time, bye-bye.